Welcome to Pushing to the Front by Orison Swett Marden, one of the most influential classics in the history of self-help and success literature. In these chapters, Marden shares timeless wisdom on ambition, persistence, leadership, and achievement. His words inspire us to overcome hesitation, strengthen our will, and move boldly toward our highest potential. Whether you're seeking personal growth, practical success strategies, or simply daily motivation, this series will encourage and guide you on your journey forward.
Chapter 20. Tact or Common Sense. "Who is stronger than thou?" asked Braham, and Force replied, "Address." Victor Hugo. Address makes opportunities. The want of it gives them. Bovee. He'll suit his bearing to the hour. Laugh, listen, learn, or teach. Eliza Cook. A man who knows the world will not only make the most of everything he does know, but of many things he does not know, and will gain more credit by his adroit mode of hiding his ignorance than the pedant by his awkward attempt to exhibit his erudition. Colton. The art of using moderate abilities to advantage wins praise, and often acquires more reputation than actual brilliancy. Rochefoucauld. Tact clinches the bargain, sails out of the bay, gets the vote in the Senate, spite of Webster or Clay. "I never will surrender to a nigger," said a Confederate officer, when a colored soldier chased and caught him. "Very sorry, massa," said the Negro, leveling his rifle. "Must kill you den. Ain't time to go back and get a white man." The officer surrendered. "When God endowed human beings with brains," says Montesquieu, "he did not intend to guarantee them." When Abraham Lincoln was running for the legislature the first time, on the platform of the improvement of the Sangamon River, he went to secure the votes of 30 men who were cradling a wheat field. They asked no questions about internal improvements, but only seemed curious to know whether he had muscle enough to represent them in the legislature. Lincoln took up a cradle and led the gang around the field. The whole 30 voted for him. "I do not know how it is," said Napoleon in surprise to his cook, "but at whatever hour I call for my breakfast, my chicken is always ready and always in good condition." This seemed to him the more strange because sometimes he would breakfast at 8 and at other times as late as 7. "Sire," said the cook, "the reason is that every quarter of an hour I put a fresh chicken down to roast, so that your Majesty is sure always to have it at perfection." Talent in this age is no match for tact. We see its failure everywhere. Tact will manipulate one talent so as to get more out of it in a lifetime than 10 talents will accomplish without it. Talent lies abed till noon, tact is up at 6. Talent is power, tact is skill. Talent knows what to do, tact knows how to do it. Talent is something, but tact is everything. It is not a sixth sense, but it is like the life of all the 5. It is the open eye, the quick ear, the judging taste, the keen smell and lively touch. It is the interpreter of all riddles, the surmounter of all difficulties, the remover of all obstacles. The world is full of theoretical, one-sided, impractical men who have turned all the energies of their lives into one faculty until they have developed not a full-orbed symmetrical man, but a monstrosity, while all their other faculties have atrophied and died. We often call these one-sided men geniuses, and the world excuses their impractical and almost idiotic conduct in most matters, because they can perform one kind of work that no one else can do as well. A merchant is excused if he is a giant in merchandise, though he may be an imbecile in the drawing room. Adam Smith could teach the world economy in his Wealth of Nations, but he could not manage the finances of his own household. Many great men are very impractical, even in the ordinary affairs of life. Isaac Newton could read the secret of creation, but, tired of rising from his chair to open the door for a cat and her kitten, he had 2 holes cut through the panels for them to pass at will, a large hole for the cat and a small one for the kitten. Beethoven was a great musician, but he sent 300 florins to pay for 6 shirts and half a dozen handkerchiefs. He paid his tailor as large a sum in advance, and yet he was so poor at times that he had only a biscuit and a glass of water for dinner. He did not know enough of business to cut the coupon from a bond when he wanted money, but sold the whole instrument. Dean Swift nearly starved in a country parish where his more practical classmate Stafford became rich. One of Napoleon's marshals understood military tactics as well as his chief, but he did not know men so well, and lacked the other's skill and tact. Napoleon might fall, but like a cat he would fall upon his feet. For his argument in the Florida case, a fee of $1,000 in crisp new bills of large denomination was handed to Daniel Webster as he sat reading in his library. The next day he wished to use some of the money, but could not find any of the bills. Years afterward, as he turned the page of a book, he found a bank bill without a crease on it. On turning the next leaf, he found another, and so on, until he took the whole amount lost from the places where he had deposited them thoughtlessly, as he read. Learning of a new issue of gold pieces at the Treasury, he directed his secretary, Charles Lanman, to obtain several $100 worth. A day or 2 after, he put his hand in his pocket for one, but they were all gone. Webster was at first puzzled, but on reflection remembered that he had given them away, one by one, to friends who seemed to appreciate their beauty. A professor in mathematics in a New England college, a bookworm, was asked by his wife to bring home some coffee. "How much will you have?" asked the merchant. "Well, I declare, my wife did not say, but I guess a bushel will do." Many a great man has been so absent-minded at times as to seem devoid of common sense. "The professor is not at home," said his servant, who looked out of a window in the dark and failed to recognize Lessing when the latter knocked at his own door in a fit of absent-mindedness. "Oh, very well," replied Lessing. "No matter, I'll call at another time." Louis Philippe said he was the only sovereign in Europe fit to govern, for he could black his own boots. The world is full of men and women apparently splendidly endowed and highly educated, yet who can scarcely get a living. Not long ago, 3 college graduates were found working on a sheep farm in Australia, one from Oxford, one from Cambridge, and the other from a German university. College men tending brutes! Trained to lead men, they drove sheep. The owner of the farm was an ignorant, coarse sheep raiser. He knew nothing of books or theories, but he knew sheep. His 3 hired graduates could speak foreign languages and discuss theories of political economy and philosophy, but he could make money. He could talk about nothing but sheep and farm, but he had made a fortune, while the college men could scarcely get a living. Even the university could not supply common sense. It was culture against ignorance, the college against the ranch, and the ranch beat every time. Do not expect too much from books. Bacon said that studies teach not their own use, but that there is a practical wisdom without them, won by observation. The use of books must be found outside their own lids. It was said of a great French scholar, "He was drowned in his talents." Overculture without practical experience weakens a man and unfits him for real life. Book education alone tends to make a man too critical, too self-conscious, timid, distrustful of his abilities, too fine for the mechanical drudgery of practical life, too highly polished, and too finely cultured for everyday use. The culture of books and colleges refines, yet it is often but an ethical culture, and is gained at the cost of vigor and rugged strength. Book culture alone tends to paralyze the practical faculties. The bookworm loses his individuality. His head is filled with theories and saturated with other men's thoughts. The stamina of the vigorous mind he brought from the farm has evaporated in college, and when he graduates, he is astonished to find that he has lost the power to grapple with men and things, and is therefore outstripped in the race of life by the boy who has had no chance, but who, in the fierce struggle for existence, has developed hard common sense and practical wisdom. The college graduate often mistakes his crutches for strength. He inhabits an ideal realm where common sense rarely dwells. The world cares little for his theories or his encyclopedic knowledge. The cry of the age is for practical men. "We have been among you several weeks," said Columbus to the Indian chiefs, "and although at first you treated us like friends, you are now jealous of us and are trying to drive us away. You brought us food in plenty every morning, but now you bring very little, and the amount is less with each succeeding day. The Great Spirit is angry with you for not doing as you agreed in bringing us provisions. To show his anger, he will cause the sun to be in darkness." He knew that there was to be an eclipse of the sun, and told the day and hour it would occur. But the Indians did not believe him, and continued to reduce the supply of food. On the appointed day the sun rose without a cloud, and the Indians shook their heads, beginning to show signs of open hostility as the hours passed without a shadow on the face of the sun. But at length a dark spot was seen on one margin, and, as it became larger, the natives grew frantic and fell prostrate before Columbus to entreat for help. He retired to his tent, promising to save them, if possible. About the time for the eclipse to pass away, he came out and said that the Great Spirit had pardoned them, and would soon drive away the monster from the sun, if they would never offend him again. They readily promised, and when the sun had passed out of the shadow they leaped and danced and sang for joy. Thereafter the Spaniards had all the provisions they needed. "Common sense," said Wendell Phillips, "bows to the inevitable and makes use of it." When Caesar stumbled in landing on the beach of Britain, he instantly grasped a handful of sand and held it aloft as a signal of triumph, hiding forever from his followers the ill omen of his threatened fall. Goethe, speaking of some comparisons that had been instituted between himself and Shakespeare, said, "Shakespeare always hits the right nail on the head at once, but I have to stop and think which is the right nail before I hit." It has been said that a few pebbles from a brook in the sling of a David, who knows how to send them to the mark, are more effective than a Goliath's spear and a Goliath's strength with a Goliath's clumsiness. "Get ready for the Redskins!" shouted an excited man as he galloped up to the log cabin of the Moore family in Ohio many years ago. and give me a fresh horse as soon as you can. They killed a family down the river last night, and nobody knows where they'll turn up next." "What shall we do?" asked Mrs. Moore, with a pale face. "My husband went away yesterday to buy our winter supplies, and will not be back until morning." "Husband away? Whew, that's bad. Well, shut up as tight as you can, cover up your fire, and don't strike a light tonight." Then, springing upon the horse the boys had brought, he galloped away to warn other settlers. Mrs. Moore carried the younger children to the loft of the cabin, and left Obed and Joe to watch, reluctantly yielding the post of danger to them at their urgent request. "They're coming, Joe," whispered Obed, early in the evening, as he saw several shadows moving across the fields. "Stand by that window with the axe, while I get the rifle pointed at this one." Opening the bullet pouch, he took out a ball, but nearly fainted as he found it was too large for the rifle. His father had taken the wrong pouch. Obed felt around to see if there were any smaller balls in the cupboard, and almost stumbled over a very large pumpkin, one of the two which he and Joe had been using to make jack-o'-lanterns when the messenger alarmed them. Pulling off his coat, he flung it over the vegetable lantern, made to imitate a gigantic grinning face with open eyes, nose, and mouth, and with a live coal from the ashes he lighted the candle inside. "They'll sound the war whoop in a minute, if I give them time," he whispered, as he raised the covered lantern to the window. "Now for it," he added, pulling the coat away. An unearthly yell greeted the appearance of the grinning monster, and the Indians fled wildly to the woods. "Quick, Joe, light up the other one! Don't you see that's what scared him so?" demanded Obed, and at the appearance of the second fiery face, the savages gave a final yell and vanished in the forest. Mr. Moore and Daylight came together, but the Indians did not return. Thurlow Weed earned his first quarter by carrying a trunk on his back from a sloop in New York Harbor to a Broad Street hotel. He had very few chances such as are now open to the humblest boy, but he had tact and intuition. He could read men as an open book and mold them to his will. He was unselfish. By 3 presidents whom his tact and shrewdness had helped to elect, he was offered the English mission and scores of other important positions, but he invariably declined. Lincoln selected Weed to attempt the reconciliation of the New York Herald, which had a large circulation in Europe, and was creating a dangerous public sentiment abroad and at home by its articles in sympathy with the Confederacy. Though Weed and Bennett had not spoken to each other before for 30 years, the very next day after their interview, the Herald became a strong Union paper. Weed was then sent to Europe to counteract the pernicious influence of secession agents. The Emperor of France favored the South. He was very indignant because Charleston harbor had been blockaded, thus shutting off French manufacturers from large supplies of cotton. But Weed's rare tact modified his views and induced him to change to friendliness the tone of a hostile speech prepared for delivery at the National Assembly. England was working night and day preparing for war when Weed arrived upon the scene, and soon changed largely the current of public sentiment. On his return to America, the city of New York extended public thanks to him for his inestimable services. He was equally successful in business, and acquired a fortune of $1 million. "Tell me the breadth of this stream," said Napoleon to his chief engineer, as they came to a bridgeless river which the army had to cross. "Sire, I cannot. My scientific instruments are with the army, and we are 10 miles ahead of it." "Measure the width of this stream instantly." "Sire, be reasonable." "Ascertain at once the width of this river, or you shall be deposed." The engineer drew the cap-piece of his helmet down until the edge seemed just in line between his eye and the opposite bank. Then, holding himself carefully erect, he turned on his heel and noticed where the edge seemed to touch the bank on which he stood, which was on the same level as the other. He paced the distance to the point last noted, and said, "This is the approximate width of the stream." He was promoted. "Mr. Webster," said the mayor of a western city, when it was learned that the great statesman, although weary with travel, would be delayed for an hour by a failure to make close connections, "allow me to introduce you to Mr. James, one of our most distinguished citizens." "How do you do, Mr. James?" asked Webster mechanically, as he glanced at 1,000 people waiting to take his hand. "The truth is, Mr. Webster," replied Mr. James in a most lugubrious tone, "I am not very well." "I hope nothing serious is the matter," thundered the godlike Daniel in a tone of anxious concern. "Well, I don't know that, Mr. Webster. I think it's rheumatiz, but my wife—" "Mr. Webster, this is Mr. Smith," broke in the mayor, leaving poor Mr. James to enjoy his bad health in the pitiless solitude of a crowd. His total want of tact had made him ridiculous. "Address yourself to the jury, sire," said a judge to a witness, who insisted upon imparting his testimony in a confidential tone to the court direct. The man did not understand, and continued as before, "Speak to the jury, sir. The men sitting behind you on the raised benches." Turning, the witness bowed low in awkward suavity and said, "Good morning, gentlemen." "What are these?" asked Napoleon, pointing to 12 silver statues in a cathedral. "The 12 apostles," was the reply. "Take them down," said Napoleon. "Melt them, coin them into money, and let them go about doing good, as their master did." "I don't think the Proverbs of Solomon show very great wisdom," said a student at Brown University. "I could make as good ones myself." "Very well," replied President Wayland. "Bring in 2 tomorrow morning." He did not bring them. "Will you lecture for us for fame?" was the telegraph young Henry Ward Beecher received from a Young Men's Christian Association in the West. "Yes, F.A.M.E. 50 and my expenses," was the answer the shrewd young preacher sent back. Montaigne tells of a monarch who, on the sudden death of an only child, showed his resentment against Providence by abolishing the Christian religion throughout his dominions for a fortnight. The triumphs of tact, or common sense, over talent and genius are seen everywhere. Walpole was an ignorant man, and Charlemagne could hardly write his name so that it could be deciphered. But these giants knew men and things, and possessed that practical wisdom and tact which have ever moved the world. Tact, like Alexander, cuts the knots it cannot untie, and leads its forces to glorious victory. A practical man not only sees, but seizes the opportunity. There is a certain getting on quality difficult to describe, but which is the great winner of the prizes of life. Napoleon could do anything in the art of war with his own hands, even to the making of gunpowder. Paul was all things to all men, that he might save some. The palm is among the hardest and least yielding of all woods, yet rather than be deprived of the rays of the life-giving sun in the dense forests of South America, it is said to turn into a creeper and climb the nearest trunk to the light. A farmer who could not get a living sold 1/2 of his farm to a young man who made enough money on the half to pay for it and buy the rest. "You have not tact," was his reply, when the old man asked how one could succeed so well where the other had failed. According to an old custom, a Cape Cod minister was called upon in April to make a prayer over a piece of land. "No," said he, when shown the land, "this does not need a prayer, it needs manure." To see a man as he is, you must turn him round and round until you get him at the right angle. Place him in a good light, as you would a picture. The excellences and defects will appear if you get the right angle. How our old schoolmates have changed places in the ranking of actual life! The boy who led his class and was the envy of all has been distanced by the poor dunce who was called slow and stupid, but who had a sort of dull energy in him which enabled him to get on in the world. The class leader had only a theoretical knowledge, and could not cope with the stern realities of the age. Even genius, however rapid its flight, must not omit a single essential detail, and must be willing to work like a horse. Shakespeare had marvelous tact. He worked everything into his plays. He ground up the king and his vassal, the fool and the fop, the prince and the peasant, the black and the white, the pure and the impure, the simple and the profound, passions and characters, honor and dishonor. Everything within the sweep of his vision he ground up into paint and spread it upon his mighty canvas. Some people show want of tact in resenting every slight or petty insult, however unworthy their notice. Others make Don Quixote's mistake of fighting a windmill by engaging in controversies with public speakers and editors who are sure to have the advantage of the final word. One of the greatest elements of strength in the character of Washington was found in his forbearance when unjustly attacked or ridiculed. Artemus Ward touches this bubble with a pretty, sharp-pointed pen. "It was in a certain town in Virginia, the mother of presidents and things, that I was shamefully abused by an editor in human form. He set my sharp steep and called me the urbane and gentlemanly manager. But when I, for the purpose of showing fair play all round, went to another office to get my handbills printed, what does this pusillanimous editor do but change his tune and abuse me like a Injun? He said my waxworks was a humbug, and called me a hoary-headed itinerant vagabond. I thought at first I'd polish him orf a la Beneke boy, but on reflecting that he could polish me much was in his paper, I give it up. And I would hear occasion to advise people when they run again, as they sometimes will, these miserable papers, to not pay no attention to 'em. Above all, don't assault an editor of this kind. It only gives him a notoriety, which is just what he wants, and don't do you no more good than it would to jump into any other mud puddle. Editors are generally fine men, but there must be black sheep in every flock." John Jacob Astor had practical talent in a remarkable degree. During a storm at sea, on his voyage to America, the other passengers ran about the deck in despair, expecting every minute to go down. But young Astor went below and coolly put on his best suit of clothes, saying that if the ship should founder and he should happen to be rescued, he would at least save his best suit of clothes. "Their trading talent is bringing the Jews to the front in America as well as in Europe," said a traveler to one of that race, "and it has gained for them an ascendancy, at least in certain branches of trade, from which nothing will ever displace them." "They are coming to the front most certainly," replied his companion. "But why do you speak of their trading talent all the time?" "But don't you regard it as a talent?" "A talent? No, it is a genius. I will tell you what is the difference, in trade, between talent and genius. When one goes into a man's store and manages to steal him that at once, that is talent. But when another man goes into that man's store and sells him what he don't want, that is genius. And that is the genius what my race has got. End of chapter 20. Tact or common sense.
If you enjoy timeless wisdom like this, consider subscribing for more audiobooks just like it.
Chapter 21. Enamored of Accuracy. Antonio Stradivari has an eye that winces at false work and loves the true. Accuracy is the twin brother of honesty. C. Simmons. Genius is the infinite art of taking pains. Carlyle. I hate a thing done by halves. If it be right, do it boldly. If it be wrong, leave it undone. Gilpin. If I were a cobbler, it would be my pride, the best of all cobblers to be. If I were a tinker, no tinker beside should mend an old kettle like me. Old Song. If a man can write a better book, preach a better sermon, or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, though he build his house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to his door. Emerson. Sir, it is a watch which I have made and regulated myself, said George Graham of London to a customer who asked how far he could depend upon its keeping correct time. Take it with you wherever you please. If after 7 years you come back to see me, and can tell me there has been a difference of 5 minutes, I will return you your money. 7 years later the gentleman returned from India. Sir, said he, I bring you back your watch. I remember our conditions, said Graham. Let me see the watch. Well, what do you complain of? Why, said the man, I have had it 7 years, and there is a difference of more than 5 minutes. Indeed, in that case I return you your money. I will not part with the watch, said the man, for 10 times the sum I paid for it. And I would not break my word for any consideration, replied Graham. So he paid the money and took the watch, which he used as a regulator. He learned his trade of Tampion, the most exquisite mechanic in London, if not in the world, whose name on a timepiece was considered proof positive of its excellence. When a person once asked him to repair a watch, upon which his name was fraudulently engraved, Tampion smashed it with a hammer and handed the astonished customer one of his own masterpieces, saying, Sir, here is a watch of my making. Graham invented the compensatory mercury pendulum, the deep escapement, and the orrery, none of which have been much improved since. The clock which he made for Greenwich Observatory has been running 150 years, yet it needs regulating but once in 15 months. Tampion and Graham lie in Westminster Abbey because of the accuracy of their work. To ensure safety, a navigator must know how far he is from the equator, north or south, and how far east or west of some known point, as Greenwich, Paris, or Washington. He could be sure of this knowledge when the sun is shining, if he could have an absolutely accurate timekeeper. But such a thing has not yet been made. In the 16th century, Spain offered a prize of 1,000 crowns for the discovery of an approximately correct method of determining longitude. About 200 years later, the English government offered £5,000 for a chronometer, by which a ship 6 months from home could get her longitude within 60 miles, £7,500 if within 40 miles, £10,000 if within 30 miles, and in another clause, £20,000 for correctness within 30 miles, a careless repetition. The watchmakers of the world contested for the prizes, but 1761 came, and they had not been awarded. In that year, John Harrison asked for a test of his chronometer. In a trip of 147 days from Portsmouth to Jamaica and back, it varied less than 2 minutes, and only 4 seconds on the outward voyage. In a round trip of 156 days to Barbados, the variation was only 15 seconds. The £20,000 was paid to the man who had worked and experimented for 40 years, and whose hand was as exquisitely delicate in its movement as the mechanism of his chronometer. "Make me as good a hammer as you know how," said a carpenter to the blacksmith in a New York village before the first railroad was built. "6 of us have come to work on the new church, and I've left mine at home." "As good a one as I know how?" asked David Maydoyle, doubtfully. "But perhaps you don't want to pay for as good a one as I know how to make." "Yes, I do," said the carpenter. "I want a good hammer." It was indeed a good hammer that he received, the best, probably, that had ever been made. By means of a longer hole than usual, David had wedged the handle in its place, so that the head could not fly off, a wonderful improvement in the eyes of the carpenter, who boasted of his prize to his companions. They all came to the shop next day, and each ordered just such a hammer. When the contractor saw the tools, he ordered 2 for himself, asking that they be made a little better than those of his men. "I can't make any better ones," said Maydoyle. "When I make a thing, I make it as well as I can, no matter whom it is for." The storekeeper soon ordered 2 dozen, a supply unheard of in his previous business career. A New York dealer in tools came to the village to sell his wares, and bought all the storekeeper had, and left a standing order for all the blacksmith could make. David might have grown very wealthy by making goods of the standard already attained, but throughout his long and successful life, he never ceased to study still further to perfect his hammers in the minutest detail. They were usually sold without any warrant of excellence, the word Maydoyle stamped on the head being universally considered a guarantee of the best article the world could produce. Character is power, and is the best advertisement in the world. "We have no secret," said the manager of an iron works employing thousands of men. "We always try to beat our last batch of rails. That is all the secret we've got, and we don't care who knows it. I don't try to see how cheap a machine I can produce, but how good a machine," said the late John C. Whitten of Northbridge, Massachusetts, to a customer who complained of the high price of some cotton machinery. Businessmen soon learned what this meant, and when there was occasion to advertise any machinery for sale, New England cotton manufacturers were accustomed to state the number of years it had been in use, and add as an all-sufficient guarantee of Northbridge products, "Whitten make." "Madame," said the sculptor H.K. Brown, as he admired a statue in alabaster made by a youth in his teens, "this boy has something in him." It was the figure of an Irishman who worked for the Ward family in Brooklyn years ago, and gave with minutest fidelity not merely the man's features and expression, but even the patches in his trousers, the rent in his coat, and the creases in his narrow-brimmed stovepipe hat. Mr. Brown saw the statue at the house of a lady living at Newburgh on the Hudson. 6 years later he invited her brother, J.Q.A. Ward, to become a pupil in his studio. Today, the name of Ward is that of the most prosperous of all American sculptors. "Paint me just as I am, warts and all," said Oliver Cromwell to the artist, who, thinking to please the great man, had omitted a mole. "I can remember when you blacked my father's shoes," said one member of the House of Commons to another in the heat of debate. "True enough," was the prompt reply. "But did I not black them well?" "It is easy to tell good indigo," said an old lady. "Just take a lump and put it into water, and if it is good, it will either sink or swim. I am not sure which, but never mind, you can try it for yourself." John B. Goff told of a colored preacher who, wishing his congregation to fresco the recess back of the pulpit, suddenly closed his Bible and said, "There, my brethren, the gospel will not be dispensed with any more from this pulpit, till the collection is sufficient to fricassee this abscess." When troubled with deafness, Wellington consulted a celebrated physician, who put strong caustic into his ear, causing an inflammation which threatened his life. The doctor apologized, expressed great regrets, and said that the blunder would ruin him. "No," said Wellington, "I will never mention it." "But you will allow me to attend you, so that people will not withdraw their confidence?" "No," said the Iron Duke, "that would be lying." "Father," said a boy, "I saw an immense number of dogs, 500, I am sure, in our street last night." "Surely not so many," said the father. "Well, there were 100, I'm quite sure." "It could not be," said the father. "I don't think there are 100 dogs in our village." "Well, sir, it could not be less than 10, this I am quite certain of." "I will not believe you saw 10 even," said the father, "for you spoke as confidently of seeing 500 as of seeing this smaller number. You have contradicted yourself twice already, and now I cannot believe you." "Well, sir," said the disconcerted boy, "I saw at least our dash and another one." We condemn the boy for exaggerating in order to tell a wonderful story. But how much more truthful are they who never saw it rain so before, or who call day after day the hottest of the summer or the coldest of the winter. There is nothing which all mankind venerate and admire so much as simple truth, exempt from artifice, duplicity, and design. It exhibits at once a strength of character and integrity of purpose, in which all are willing to confide. To say nice things merely to avoid giving offense, to keep silent rather than speak the truth, to equivocate, to evade, to dodge, to say what is expedient rather than what is truthful, to shirk the truth, to face both ways, to exaggerate, to seem to concur with another's opinions when you do not, to deceive by a glance of the eye, a nod of the head, a smile, a gesture, to lack sincerity, to assume to know or think or feel what you do not. All these are but various manifestations of hollowness and falsehood resulting from want of accuracy. We find no lying, no inaccuracy, no slipshod business in nature. Roses blossom and crystals form with the same precision of tint and angle today as in Eden on the morning of creation. The rose in the Queen's garden is not more beautiful, more fragrant, more exquisitely perfect than that which blooms and blushes unheeded amid the fern-decked brush by the roadside, or in some far-off glen where no human eye ever sees it. The crystal found deep in the earth is constructed with the same fidelity as that formed above ground. Even the tiny snowflake, whose destiny is to become an apparently insignificant and a wholly unnoticed part of an enormous bank, assumes its shape of ethereal beauty as faithfully as though preparing for some grand exhibition. Planets rush with dizzy sweep through almost limitless courses, yet return to equinox or solstice at the appointed second, their very movement being the uniform manifestation of the will of God. The marvelous resources and growth of America have developed an unfortunate tendency to overstate, overdraw, and exaggerate. It seems strange that there should be so strong a temptation to exaggerate in a country where the truth is more wonderful than fiction. The positive is stronger than the superlative, but we ignore this fact in our speech. Indeed, it is really difficult to ascertain the exact truth in America. How many American fortunes are built on misrepresentation that is needless, for nothing else is half so strong as truth. "Does the devil lie?" was asked of Sir Thomas Browne. "No, for then even he could not exist." Truth is necessary to permanency. In Siberia, a traveler found men who could see the satellites of Jupiter with the naked eye. These men have made little advance in civilization, yet they are far superior to us in their accuracy of vision. It is a curious fact that not a single astronomical discovery of importance has been made through a large telescope. The men who have advanced our knowledge of that science the most working with ordinary instruments backed by most accurately trained minds and eyes. A double convex lens 3 feet in diameter is worth $60,000. Its adjustment is so delicate that the human hand is the only instrument thus far known suitable for giving the final polish. And one sweep of the hand, more than is needed, Alvin Clark says, would impair the correctness of the glass. During the test of the great glass which he made for Russia, the workmen turned it a little with their hands. "Wait, boys, let it cool before making another trial," said Clark. "The poise is so delicate that the heat from your hands affects it." Mr. Clark's love of accuracy has made his name a synonym of exactness the world over. "No, I can't do it. It is impossible," said Webster, when urged to speak on a question soon to come up, toward the close of a congressional session. "I am so pressed with other duties that I haven't time to prepare myself to speak upon that theme." "Ah, but Mr. Webster, you always speak well upon any subject. You never fail." "But that's the very reason," said the orator, "because I never allow myself to speak upon any subject without first making that subject thoroughly my own. I haven't time to do that in this instance. Hence I must refuse." Rufus Choate would plead before a shoemaker justice of the peace in a petty case with all the fervor and careful attention to detail with which he addressed the United States Supreme Court. "Whatever is right to do," said an eminent writer, "should be done with our best care, strength, and faithfulness of purpose. We have no scales by which we can weigh our faithfulness to duties or determine their relative importance in God's eyes. That which seems a trifle to us may be the secret spring which shall move the issues of life and death. There goes a man that has been to hell," the Florentines would say when Dante passed. So realistic seemed to them his description of the netherworld. "There is only one real failure in life possible," said Canon Farrar, "and that is not to be true to the best one knows." "It is quite astonishing," Grove said of Beethoven, "to find the length of time during which some of the best known instrumental melodies remained in his thoughts, till they were finally used, or the crude, vague, commonplace shape in which they were first written down. The more they are elaborated, the more fresh and spontaneous they become. Leonardo da Vinci would walk across Milan to change a single tint or the slightest detail in his famous picture of the Last Supper. Every line was then written twice over by Pope, said his publisher, Dodsley, of manuscript brought to be copied. Gibbon wrote his memoir 9 times, and the first chapters of his history 18 times. Of one of his works, Montesquieu said to a friend, "You will read it in a few hours, but I assure you it has cost me so much labor that it has whitened my hair." He had made it his study by day and his dream by night, the alpha and omega of his aims and objects. "He who does not write as well as he can on every occasion," said George Ripley, "will soon form the habit of not writing well on any occasion." An accomplished entomologist thought he would perfect his knowledge by a few lessons under Professor Agassiz. The latter handed him a dead fish and told him to use his eyes. 2 hours later he examined his new pupil, but soon remarked, "You haven't really looked at the fish yet. You'll have to try again." After a second examination he shook his head, saying, "You do not show that you can use your eyes." This roused the pupil to earnest effort, and he became so interested in things he had never noticed before that he did not see Agassiz when he came for the third examination. "That will do," said the great scientist. "I now see that you can use your eyes." Reynolds said he could go on retouching a picture forever. The captain of a Nantucket whaler told the man at the wheel to steer by the North Star, but was awakened towards morning by a request for another star to steer by, as they had sailed by the other. Stephen Girard was precision itself. He did not allow those in his employ to deviate in the slightest degree from his ironclad orders. He believed that no great success is possible without the most rigid accuracy in everything. He did not vary from a promise in the slightest degree. People knew that his word was not pretty good, but absolutely good. He left nothing to chance. Every detail of business was calculated and planned to a nicety. He was as exact and precise, even in the smallest trifles, as Napoleon. Yet his brother merchants attributed his superior success to good luck. In 1805, Napoleon broke up the great camp he had formed on the shores of the English Channel, and gave orders for his mighty host to defile towards the Danube. Vast and various as were the projects fermenting in his brain, however, he did not content himself with giving the order, and leaving the elaboration of its details to his lieutenants. To details and minutiae, which inferior captains would have deemed too microscopic for their notice, he gave such exhaustive attention that before the bugle had sounded for the march, he had planned the exact route which every regiment was to follow, the exact day and hour it was to leave that station, and the precise moment when it was to reach its destination. These details, so thoroughly premeditated, were carried out to the letter, and the result of that memorable march was the victory of Austerlitz, which sealed the fate of Europe for 10 years. When a noted French preacher speaks in Notre Dame, the scholars of Paris throng the cathedral to hear his fascinating, eloquent, polished discourses. This brilliant finish is the result of most patient work, as he delivers but 5 or 6 sermons a year. When Sir Walter Scott visited a ruined castle about which he wished to write, he wrote in a notebook the separate names of grasses and wild flowers growing near, saying that only by such means can a writer be natural. The historian, Macaulay, never allowed a sentence to stand until it was as good as he could make it. Besides his scrapbooks, Garfield had a large case of some 50 pigeonholes, labeled anecdotes, electoral laws and commissions, French spoliation, general politics, Geneva Award, parliamentary decisions, public men, state politics, tariff, the press, United States history, etc. Every valuable hint he could get being preserved in the cold exactness of black and white. When he chose to make careful preparation on a subject, no other speaker could command so great an array of facts. Accurate people are methodical people, and method means character. Am offered 10,000 bushels wheat on your account at $1. Shall I buy, or is it too high? Telegraphed a San Francisco merchant to one in Sacramento. No price too high, came back over the wire, instead of no, price too high, as was intended. The omission of a period cost the Sacramento dealer $1,000. How many thousands have lost their wealth or lives? And how many frightful accidents have occurred through carelessness in sending messages? The accurate boy is always the favored one, said President Tuttle. Those who employ men do not wish to be on the constant lookout, as though they were rogues or fools. If a carpenter must stand at his journeyman's elbow to be sure his work is right, or if a cashier must run over his bookkeeper's columns, he might as well do the work himself as employ another to do it in that way. And it is very certain that the employer will get rid of such a blunderer as soon as he can. If you make a good pin, said a successful manufacturer, you will earn more than if you make a bad steam engine. There are women, said Fields, whose stitches always come out, and the buttons they sew on fly off on the mildest provocation. There are other women who use the same needle and thread, and you may tug away at their work on your coat or waistcoat, and you can't start a button in a generation. Carelessness, indifference, slouchiness, slipshod financiering could truthfully be written over the graves of thousands who have failed in life. How many clerks, cashiers, clergymen, editors, and professors in college have lost position and prestige by carelessness and inaccuracy? You would be the greatest man of your age, Grattan, said Curran, if you would buy a few yards of red tape and tie up your bills and papers. Curran realized that methodical people are accurate, and, as a rule, successful. Berg tells of a man beginning business who opened and shut his shop regularly at the same hour every day for weeks, without selling 2 cents worth, yet whose application attracted attention and paved the way to fortune. A.T. Stewart was extremely systematic and precise in all his transactions. Method ruled in every department of his store, and for every delinquency a penalty was rigidly enforced. His eye was upon his business in all its ramifications. He mastered every detail and worked hard. From the time Jonas Chickering began to work for a piano maker, he was noted for the pains and care with which he did everything. To him there were no trifles in the manufacturing of pianos. Neither time nor labor was of any account to him, compared with accuracy and knowledge. He soon made pianos in a factory of his own. He determined to make an instrument yielding the fullest and richest volume of melody with the least exertion to the player, withstanding atmospheric changes and preserving its purity and truthfulness of tone. He resolved that each piano should be an improvement upon the one which preceded it. Perfection was his aim. To the end of his life he gave the finishing touch to each of his instruments, and would trust it to no one else. He permitted no irregularity in workmanship or sales, and was characterized by simplicity, transparency, and straightforwardness. He distanced all competitors. Chickering's name was such a power that one piano maker had his name changed to Chickering by the Massachusetts legislature and put it on his pianos. But Jonas Chickering sent a petition to the legislature, and the name was changed back. Character has a commercial as well as an ethical value. Joseph M. W. Turner was intended by his father for a barber, but he showed such a taste for drawing that a reluctant permission was given for him to follow art as a profession. He soon became skillful, but as he lacked means, he took anything to do that came in his way, frequently illustrating guidebooks and almanacs. But although the pay was very small, the work was never careless. His labor was worth several times what he received for it. But the price was increased, and work of higher grade given him simply because men seek the services of those who are known to be faithful, and employ them in as lofty work as they seem able to do. And so he toiled upward, until he began to employ himself, his work sure of a market at some price, and the price increasing as other men began to get glimpses of the transcendent art revealed in his paintings, an art not fully comprehended even in our day. He surpassed the acknowledged masters in various fields of landscape work, and left matchless studies of natural scenery in lines never before attempted. What Shakespeare is in literature, Turner is in his special field, the greatest name on record. The demand for perfection in the nature of Wendell Phillips was wonderful. Every word must exactly express the shade of his thought. Every phrase must be of due length and cadence. Every sentence must be perfectly balanced before it left his lips. Exact precision characterized his style. He was easily the first forensic orator America has produced. The rhythmic fullness and poise of his periods are remarkable. Alexandre Dumas prepared his manuscript with the greatest care. When consulted by a friend whose article had been rejected by several publishers, he advised him to have it handsomely copied by a professional penman, and then changed the title. The advice was taken, and the article eagerly accepted by one of the very publishers who had refused it before. Many able essays have been rejected because of poor penmanship. We must strive after accuracy as we would after wisdom, or hidden treasure, or anything we would attain. Determined to form exact business habits. Avoid slipshod financiering as you would the plague. Careless and indifferent habits would soon ruin a millionaire. Nearly every very successful man is accurate and painstaking. Accuracy means character, and character is power. End of chapter 21. Enamored of Accuracy.